After my stroke, I was partially paralyzed. My son abandoned me. In a cheap nursing home, he didn't know I had just received a millionaire inheritance. This is my story of how I lost everything, only to gain something far more valuable, my dignity. Subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights in Sunset Care Home buzzed above me like angry wasps as I struggled to button my cardigan with fingers that refused to cooperate. 8 months after my stroke, my left side still betrayed me daily, a constant reminder of how quickly life can change. Need help with that, Mrs. Sullivan? A young aide poked her head in, already backing out before I could answer. They were always rushing here, too many patients, too few staff. I can manage, I lied, my professor's pride still intact even as my body failed me. It took 3 more minutes of fumbling before I gave up, leaving the buttons misaligned. I glanced at the clock. 2:15 p.m. Robert was late, as usual. My only child, my son who promised he'd always take care of me after I sold my house to fund his business venture 10 years ago. The same business that now apparently afforded him a new Lexus, while I sat in this glorified storage facility for the elderly. When he finally arrived at 2:40, he didn't apologize for his tardiness. "Hey, Mom." He kissed my cheek perfunctorily, the scent of expensive cologne hanging in the air between us. "How's it going today?" The food was cold again, and I waited 2 hours for someone to help me to physical therapy. I kept my voice steady, determined not to sound like the complaining old woman they all expected. Robert checked his watch, then his phone. "They're understaffed everywhere these days." "I was thinking," I said carefully, "that maybe with some in-home help I could manage at my—" I caught myself. "Not my house anymore." "At your guest room? Perhaps." His sigh was barely concealed. "Mom, we've discussed this. I can't afford private home care. This place is what fits our budget right now." Our budget. As if my teacher's pension that helped pay for this place was insignificant compared to his contribution. "Did Melissa enjoy the Disney trip?" I asked instead, changing the subject to my granddaughter. His eyes widened slightly, caught off guard. "How did you—" "Jason showed me pictures on his phone last visit. The Cinderella castle looked beautiful at night." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "It was a package deal, very affordable." The words hung between us like an accusation. His definition of affordable apparently included vacations, but not adequate care for his mother. "Lisa and the kids send their love," he said, already standing. "I've got a client meeting at 4, so I should get going." 20 minutes. That's what I was worth in his busy schedule. After he left, I wheeled myself to the window, watching his gleaming car pull away. 10 years ago, when John died, I'd sold our home of 30 years, the home where Robert had grown up, and handed my son nearly every penny to save his failing business. "I'll always take care of you, Mom," he'd promised as I signed away my independence. That's what family does. A light knock interrupted my thoughts. Diana, the youngest nurse on staff, entered with a gentle smile. "Rough visit?" she asked, noting my expression. "Just short," I replied, my throat tight. She knelt beside my wheelchair, her eyes kind. "You know, Mrs. Sullivan, some people don't deserve the parents they have." I covered her hand with mine, grateful for this small compassion from a stranger when my own blood offered none. "Diana," I said quietly, "how much longer until my physical therapy evaluation?" "That's actually why I came. Dr. Patel moved your assessment up. He thinks you might benefit from a more intensive program." For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. "More intensive means more progress?" "It could. You've been working harder than most patients I see." She paused. "I've watched you practicing your exercises when you think no one's looking." I hadn't realized anyone had noticed my private struggles in the bathroom mirror. Willing my left hand to grasp the hairbrush, commanding my foot to pivot properly. "Determination matters more than age," Diana continued. "My grandmother recovered from a worse stroke at 72. As she helped me navigate to the therapy room, I pondered Robert's dismissal of my recovery potential. Everyone here saw me as a permanent resident, slowly declining until I eventually disappeared entirely. But what if they were wrong? What if I wasn't finished yet? Dr. Patel's evaluation was thorough. When he finished, he looked at me with professional candor. "Mrs. Sullivan, with consistent work, I believe you could regain significant function. Not everything, but enough to potentially live more independently with proper support." I straightened in my wheelchair. "Define proper support." "That depends on your resources." "Resources? The word echoed in my mind as I was wheeled back to my room. The resources I'd given away, believing in promises that had evaporated as quickly as Robert had from my room today. As the afternoon light faded, I made a decision. I would document everything, every neglected call button, every cold meal, every promised visit that never materialized. My tablet, which Robert had reluctantly let me keep, "What does a woman your age need with technology?" would become my record. I might be physically diminished, but my mind, the mind that had analyzed literature and taught generations of students to find hidden meanings, was still razor sharp, and it was telling me something was very wrong with my son's sudden inability to meet my needs. "Mrs. Sullivan, your medications." The night nurse's voice barely registered as I stared at the institutional beige wall, counting the water stains shaped like continents I'd never visit. 2 weeks had passed since Robert's last visit. No calls, no texts, just silence. I swallowed the pills without question, a routine as predictable as the indignities that structured my days at Sunset Care Home. This morning, I'd waited 40 minutes for assistance to the bathroom. By the time someone responded, it was too late. The humiliation burned hotter than any physical pain. "The physical therapist left this for you." The nurse handed me a printed exercise sheet before hurrying out to her next patient. I studied the diagrams, tracing the movements with my good hand first, then attempting to mirror them with my weaker side. Small victories counted here. Today I could lift my left arm 3 inches higher than yesterday. Progress measured in centimeters, in seconds, in breaths. "You're working those exercises pretty hard." I looked up to find an elegant older woman watching me from the doorway, leaning on a walker decorated with colorful yarn pom-poms. "Eleanor Phillips," she introduced herself with a smile that reached her eyes. "Room 218. I've seen you in therapy." "Margaret Sullivan," I replied, lowering my trembling arm. "Room 157. She navigated to the visitor's chair with practiced efficiency. "You're new. Stroke? Is it that obvious?" "My husband had one 6 years ago. I recognize the exercises." She settled herself comfortably. "The left side's affected, yes?" Mine was the right. "Your husband recovered well?" I asked hopefully. Her smile faltered. "Charles passed last year, pneumonia, but he'd regained enough mobility to play with our great-granddaughter. That meant everything to him." We sat in comfortable silence before Eleanor spoke again. "My daughter's supposed to visit today. She manages my finances, now says it's easier that way." There was something in her tone that made me ask, "And is it? Easier?" Eleanor's laugh held no humor. "She bought a new car with my retirement money last month, but she brings the grandchildren at Easter, so I don't complain." Before I could respond, a conversation in the hallway caught my attention. "Moved to a shared room to reduce costs," her son called again. It was Gretchen, the charge nurse with permanently pinched features. "Didn't he just cancel his visit?" Another voice responded. "Says his mother exaggerates her needs, always has according to him. Typical family dumping ground situation." My body went cold. Robert was reducing my care, claiming I exaggerated? Eleanor noticed my expression and reached for my hand. "You heard something unpleasant." I nodded, unable to speak past the betrayal lodged in my throat. "The walls here might as well be made of paper," she said. "I've learned more about my children from overheard phone calls than from their actual visits." That evening, I powered up my tablet, the one connection to independence Robert had reluctantly allowed me to keep. My grandchildren had insisted, arguing their grandmother needed to see their baseball games and dance recitals through video calls. Those calls rarely came now. I opened a new document and began typing awkwardly with my right hand. Day 1 of documentation. Robert canceled visit. Overheard staff saying he's requested I be moved to a shared room to reduce costs. Claims I exaggerate my needs. Waited 40 minutes for bathroom assistance today. Meal was cold again. PT says improvement possible with intensive therapy. I synced the document to my email account, creating a record that existed beyond these walls. A small act of self-preservation that felt surprisingly powerful. As I prepared for bed, Diana stopped by for her evening rounds. "I heard the Johnsons are moving Mr. Peterson to a shared room," I commented casually. Diana's hands paused while checking my blood pressure. "The facility director makes those decisions, not the Johnsons. But family requests carry weight?" She met my eyes. "They shouldn't, not when it impacts care quality. But money talks, Mrs. Sullivan, especially in places like this." I nodded, adding another note to my mental file. "You know," Diana said, voice lowered, There are resources for elder advocacy, organizations that help navigate these situations. What situations? When families make decisions that may not align with a patient's best interests. The blood pressure cuff tightened uncomfortably. Or perhaps it was just the truth squeezing my heart. I'd be interested in learning more, I said, my professor's thirst for knowledge merging with something newer and sharper, self-protection. That night, I dreamed of my house, the one I'd sold, to save Robert's business. In the dream, I stood in my old kitchen, fully mobile, making Sunday dinner while John read the newspaper at the table. Glasses perched on his nose. The home we'd built together, sacrificed for a son who now considered me a burden. I woke with tears on my face and a resolution forming in my mind. Something had to change. I just didn't know how to make it happen with my limited resources and increasingly limited body. Limited. Little did I know, change was already moving toward me in the form of a long-delayed letter. Mrs. Sullivan, there's mail for you. Diana's voice pulled me from the fog of afternoon medication. 3 weeks at Sunset Care Home had taught me the rhythm of institutional living. Wake, medicate, eat, therapy, rest, eat, medicate, sleep, rinse and repeat until death provided the only real escape. Mail was an anomaly in this sterile routine. It's been sitting at the front desk for a while, Diana apologized, handing me a crisp envelope. Sometimes things get overlooked. The return address read, Winters and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Boston, Massachusetts. My fingers trembled as I opened it, and not just from post-stroke weakness. Dear Ms. Sullivan, we regret to inform you of the passing of Harold Blackwood on March 15th. As executors of Mr. Blackwood's estate, we are contacting you as a named beneficiary in his will. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. Sincerely, James Winters, Escumern Harold, my mother's brother, the uncle who had paid for my college education when my parents couldn't afford it, the brilliant engineer whose letters had sustained me through graduate school, the family connection that had dissolved after my marriage to John, a man my uncle had warned, was beneath my potential. Harold had been right about John's financial irresponsibility, but wrong about his heart. We'd been happy despite our modest means. After our estrangement, I'd occasionally followed Harold's career through professional journals, patents filed, innovations credited to his name, but we hadn't spoken in over 40 years. Bad news? Diana asked, noting my expression. My uncle died, I whispered, the words inadequate for the complex emotions colliding inside me. Grief for a relationship long lost, regret for decades of silence, and bewilderment at being named in his will. I'm sorry for your loss, Diana said automatically. I lost him a long time ago, I replied. We hadn't spoken since before Robert was born. With Diana's help, I called the number on the letterhead. After navigating a labyrinth of receptionists, I reached James Winters himself. Mrs. Sullivan, he greeted me warmly. I'm pleased you contacted us. I understand you're currently in a care facility. I explained my situation briefly, the stroke, my limited mobility, the arrangement with my son. I see, he said, his tone shifting subtly. Perhaps I should speak with your son about the inheritance then. As your caretaker? Something in his phrasing sent warning signals through my mind. What exactly did my uncle leave me, Mr. Winters? A pause. Harold Blackwood left you his entire estate, Mrs. Sullivan. After taxes and fees, it's valued at approximately $8 million. The room tilted. I gripped my wheelchair armrest, anchoring myself against the vertigo of sudden possibility. Mrs. Sullivan? Are you there? Yes, I managed. I'm just surprised. Your uncle never married or had children. He had quite a successful career in engineering and patent development. According to our records, he kept every letter you sent him during your college years. He mentioned you often in our meetings. A tide of emotion washed over me. Harold had remembered me all these years, had thought of me while I'd been building my life, raising Robert, teaching my students. Should I contact your son to help facilitate the transfer of assets? Mr. Winters prompted again. The question crystallized something inside me. A lifetime of making responsible choices, of putting others first, of trusting family, and where had it left me? In a substandard care facility, waiting 40 minutes for bathroom assistance, while my son canceled visits and plotted to reduce my care. No, I said firmly. Not yet. I'd like to understand my options first. Of course, Mr. Winters replied, his tone suggesting approval. We can arrange a private consultation. Given your mobility issues, perhaps I could come to you? As we finished the call, Diana returned with my evening meal, lukewarm meatloaf and congealed gravy. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting my dazed expression. I considered telling her, this kind young woman who'd shown me more compassion than my own son had in months. But caution, a new protective instinct, held me back. "Just processing," I said. "My uncle was not someone I expected to remember me." That night, I added to my growing digital journal, "Harold remembered me. All these years while I was teaching literature to ungrateful freshmen, raising an increasingly distant son, and gradually losing John to heart disease, Harold remembered our connection. While I gave everything to a son who now considers me a burden, my estranged uncle held me in his heart enough to leave me his fortune. What does this mean for me now? For the remaining years of my life? $8 million. The figure danced through my dreams that night, not as visions of luxury or indulgence, but as something far more precious: options, freedom, control over my own destiny for whatever time I had left. Morning brought clarity and resolve. I needed to move carefully, strategically. This unexpected gift from Harold could change everything, but only if I was smarter about it than I'd been about selling my house to Robert. I would need allies, information, a plan. And most importantly, I would need to understand exactly who my son had become in the years I'd spent seeing only what I wanted to see. "Mom, I got your message. What's this about financial news?" Robert burst into my room without knocking, his tie slightly askew, the only visible crack in his usually polished exterior. I'd called him yesterday with a deliberately vague message about important financial matters we need to discuss. After weeks of ignored calls and canceled visits, it had taken only the hint of money to bring him running. "Hello, Robert. It's good to see you too." I folded my hands in my lap, a gesture of calm I didn't entirely feel. He had the decency to look slightly abashed. "Sorry. Work's been crazy. How are you feeling?" "About the same as when you last asked 3 weeks ago." He winced, then pulled up the visitor's chair. "You mentioned something financial?" I studied my son's face, the face I'd once wiped ice cream from. The face I'd watched graduate college, the face that now showed more interest in me than it had in months, all because of the possibility of money. "I received a letter," I began, measuring my words carefully. "My Uncle Harold passed away." "Uncle Harold? Mom, I don't think you've ever mentioned my mother's brother. We were close when I was younger, before I married your father." I paused. "He's included me in his will." The transformation was immediate and disturbing. Robert's posture straightened, his expression softened, his entire demeanor shifted from impatient to attentive. "That's unexpected. Was he well off?" I nodded, deliberately vague. "He had a successful engineering career. Patents, innovations. Wow, that's great news, Mom." Robert leaned forward, his smile suddenly wide and eager. "You know, I've been thinking, this place isn't really giving you the care you deserve. We might be able to find somewhere better." "Better than what your budget allows?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. He didn't notice. "Absolutely. Maybe even home care. You could move in with us for a while." The offer I'd begged for months ago, now extended freely at the mere suggestion of inheritance money. "That's quite a change of heart," I observed. "Last time we discussed home care, you said it was impossible." "Well, circumstances change," he waved dismissively. "How much are we talking about here, Mom?" The question hung between us, naked in its avarice. "I'm not entirely sure," I lied. "The lawyer says the estate is still being settled. Death taxes, legal fees, that sort of thing." Robert's expression flickered with impatience. "But a ballpark? Thousands? More?" "Mr. Winters, that's Harold's attorney, says it will take time to get the full picture. These things are complicated. I can help with that. I know people who specialize in estate matters." Of course he did. People who would tell him exactly how to access my money most efficiently. "That's thoughtful, but Mr. Winters seems quite competent." I changed the subject. "How are Lisa and the kids? I've missed them." The conversation that followed was painfully revealing. Not once did Robert ask how I'd been feeling, whether I was happy here, if I was making progress in therapy. Instead, he outlined increasingly elaborate plans for my future, all predicated on access to funds he knew nothing about. "We could convert the den into a great first-floor bedroom for you," he enthused. "Get one of those medical beds that adjusts. You'd be comfortable there." "That sounds expensive," I noted mildly. "Well, with Uncle Harold's help, He smiled, as if we shared a private joke about a man he'd never met. When Robert finally left, promising to return tomorrow with Lisa to discuss options, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My son, my only child, had revealed himself more completely in the past hour than in all the months I'd been at Sunset. Diana found me staring out the window an hour later. "That bad?" she asked, checking my evening medications. "Worse," I admitted. "Diana, do you know anything about elder rights, legal protections?" She hesitated. "Some. My grandmother had similar issues with family after her stroke. Would you help me research something? I need information about financial protections, healthcare proxies, power of attorney." Diana's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Sullivan, are you worried about your son's intentions? Let's just say I need to understand my options before making any decisions." She nodded slowly. "I can help, but you should know this could get complicated." I thought about Robert's sudden interest in my care, his immediate plans for my money, his failure to even ask if I was happy. "It's already complicated," I replied. "I just need to make sure I'm not outmaneuvered again." That evening, I called Mr. Winters back, requesting a private meeting. We agreed he would visit in 2 days, officially to discuss routine paperwork. As I prepared for bed, my tablet pinged with an incoming email. It was from Robert, with floor plans for a mother-in-law suite addition to his house, already priced out at $175,000. He'd moved remarkably quickly for someone who'd had no time to visit his mother for weeks. I added to my digital journal. Robert visited immediately after hearing about potential inheritance. Never asked about my health, happiness, or progress. Already planning expensive renovations to his home. Treating Harold's money as if it's already his to spend. I need to protect myself. Not just my new financial resources, but my autonomy. My right to determine my own future. Harold's gift isn't just money. It's the chance to reclaim control of my life. To ensure I'm never again at the mercy of someone else's budget for my care. The realization settled over me like armor. For too long, I'd been a supporting character in my own life story. First as John's wife, then as Robert's mother, finally as Sunset's patient in room 157. It was time to become the protagonist again. The Hillcrest Assisted Living Community offers premium services for discerning seniors, the brochure in my lap proclaimed. Glossy photos showed smiling elderly residents engaged in watercolor classes and Tai Chi. 1 month after Robert learned of my inheritance, I found myself relocated to this upscale facility, not Robert's house as initially offered, but a place conveniently located just 10 minutes from his suburban home. "Isn't this better, Mom?" Robert gestured around my new private suite, with its tasteful decor and large windows overlooking manicured gardens. "The care here is top-notch." It was undeniably better than Sunset. The staff-to-patient ratio alone meant I rarely waited for assistance. The food was palatable, the physical therapy equipment state-of-the-art, but the sudden upgrade only underscored the inadequacy of what Robert had deemed sufficient before the prospect of inheritance money. "It's very nice," I acknowledged, "though I'm curious why you decided against having me stay with you, as you originally suggested." Robert's smile tightened imperceptibly. "The contractor said the renovations would take months. This is better for now, while we navigate the inheritance process." The inheritance process. That convenient phrase that justified anything and everything in Robert's mind. "Speaking of which," he continued, pulling papers from his briefcase, "I've been talking with my financial advisor about the best way to manage Uncle Harold's estate. Once it transfers, we should set up joint accounts to simplify things." I glanced at the document's power of attorney forms, joint banking authorizations, healthcare directives naming Robert as my decision-maker. "These look complicated," I said mildly. "I'll need to review them carefully." "It's all standard stuff, Mom. Just makes it easier for me to handle things for you." I placed the papers aside. I've always been thorough with legal matters. "Robert, you know that. I taught contract law in the English department. Remember?" His expression flickered between frustration and forced patience. "Of course. Take your time. But the sooner we get this settled, the sooner we can access the funds. We. As if Harold's bequest was a family windfall rather than my inheritance. After Robert left, I examined my new surroundings more critically. Yes, Hillcrest was luxurious compared to Sunset, but it was still an institution, still a place where my life would be regulated by others, still not home. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Mrs. Sullivan? I'm Nancy Garcia. Your care coordinator. The young woman who entered had a direct gaze and confident manner. Robert had hired her to visit 3 times weekly as a personal care assistant, another upgrade that hadn't been possible before Uncle Harold. Your son mentioned you might need help settling in, Nancy continued, and that you're recovering from a stroke. 8 months ago, I confirmed. Left side mobility issues, though I'm improving with therapy. Nancy nodded professionally. I've reviewed your medical records. Your progress is impressive for someone your age. For someone my age, I repeated dryly. Is that clinical language for not completely hopeless? Unexpectedly, Nancy laughed. It's clinical language for you're working harder than most patients half your age. I admired determination, Mrs. Sullivan. Something about her directness appealed to me. Call me Margaret, and thank you for not treating me like I'm made of glass or suffering from dementia. The stroke affected my body, not my mind. That's clear from your records. You've been advocating for more intensive therapy from the beginning. We spent the next hour reviewing my daily routine and needs. Nancy asked insightful questions about my preferences and goals. The first healthcare provider who'd bothered to do so since my stroke. One last thing, Nancy said as she prepared to leave. I'm finishing my master's in gerontology at Georgetown. My focus is elder advocacy and rights, just so you know my background. The coincidence seemed too perfect. Did my son know this when he hired you? No, Nancy replied. The agency assigned me based on scheduling. Why? I considered whether to trust this stranger with my concerns, but something in her professional demeanor gave me confidence. Just curious, I said. Though I'd be interested in hearing more about your studies sometime, perhaps at our next meeting. 2 weeks later, Robert and Lisa invited me to dinner at their home, the first such invitation since my stroke. Lisa seemed genuinely pleased to see me, though her strained smiles whenever Robert mentioned Mom's inheritance told their own story. As Robert helped me back to the car afterward, I noticed mail on the console, a bank notice marked Urgent Final Foreclosure Warning, and a credit card statement with Payment Overdue stamped in red. Everything okay with the business, Robert? I asked casually. He shoved the papers under a folder. Just typical cash flow challenges. Nothing serious, but his tight expression and the way his hands gripped the steering wheel suggested otherwise. That night in my new apartment at Hillcrest, I made 2 important calls. One to Mr. Winters to discuss creating a trust for my inheritance, and another to Diana at Sunset, offering to help her find a position at Hillcrest. Both conversations confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. Robert's financial situation was far more precarious than he'd admitted, and his sudden attentiveness had everything to do with accessing Harold's money. As I updated my digital journal, I added a new note. Robert's business may be failing. His lifestyle, the new car, the vacations, the house appears to be built on debt. He sees Harold's bequest as his salvation, not my security. I need to protect myself without alienating him completely. A balance between caution and compassion. But as I switched off my tablet, I wondered if that balance was even possible. The son I thought I knew, the boy I'd sacrificed for, the man I'd trusted with my future, seemed increasingly like a stranger. And strangers couldn't be trusted with $8 million, or with my remaining years. Mrs. Sullivan, we have a few options for structuring the trust. James Winters spread documents across the conference table in his downtown office. The doctor's appointment I'd asked Nancy to drive me to was actually this crucial meeting, 3 months after learning of my inheritance. Nancy sat quietly in the corner, her presence both practical, I still needed assistance with mobility, and strategic as a witness to my clear mental capacity. The irrevocable trust gives you the strongest protection, Mr. Winters continued. Once established, these assets can't be touched by creditors or manipulated by anyone trying to influence you. His diplomatic phrasing made me smile faintly. You mean my son? Mr. Winters adjusted his glasses. I've seen family dynamics change when significant assets enter the picture. The arrangement you described, your care facility upgrades, coinciding with your son's knowledge of the inheritance. His sudden interest in joint accounts follows a concerning pattern. How long would establishing this trust take? I asked, running my fingers along the document's edge. 6 to 8 months for complete implementation. We'd need to transfer assets gradually, establish the trust framework, name trustees. And in the meantime, we maintain the appearance of processing the inheritance. Your nephew, son, I corrected automatically. Forgive me. Your son need not know the full value or the protective measures being implemented. I nodded, considering the chess game ahead. Robert's growing impatient. He's brought paperwork for me to sign 3 times now, which you've wisely declined. Mr. Winters leaned forward. Mrs. Sullivan, I must ask, what are your long-term intentions regarding your son? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Do you intend to provide financial support to him eventually? Is reconciliation a goal? Or is your priority simply protecting your assets for your care and perhaps other beneficiaries? I stared out the window at the city skyline, considering the complexity of maternal love colliding with self-preservation. I don't want to punish Robert, I said finally, but I can't trust him with control over my life or finances. Not anymore. Mr. Winters nodded. Then I suggest a 2-pronged approach. First, the irrevocable trust for the bulk of the inheritance, with yourself as primary beneficiary and a professional trustee managing disbursements. Second, a smaller immediate distribution, perhaps $50,000, as a gesture of goodwill to your son. A distraction, I translated. A strategic concession, he corrected, with the ghost of a smile. It provides immediate relief for his financial pressures while buying time for the larger protective measures. On the drive back to Hillcrest, Nancy remained thoughtfully silent until we were halfway there. You're very brave, she said finally. Brave? Or just finally being sensible? Both. Nancy navigated through traffic with practiced ease. Many people in your position would simply give in. Family pressure is powerful, especially when you're physically vulnerable. I thought about the mounting pressure from Robert, his increasingly frequent visits always circling back to the inheritance, his not-so-subtle comments about how his business troubles could be solved once this estate business is settled. I've already given in once, I replied. I sold my home to help Robert's business after his father died. He promised to take care of me when I needed it. You've seen how that promise was kept. Nancy nodded. The Sunset Care Home, the cheapest facility he could find, where I waited hours for basic assistance, where he visited less and less frequently, always too busy to stay more than 20 minutes. I gazed out the window. I won't make the same mistake again. This inheritance isn't just money, it's the freedom to determine my own future. Back at Hillcrest, I found Diana now employed as an activities coordinator thanks to my recommendation, waiting with news. Your son called the administration office, she said quietly. He was asking questions about whether you really need the private room and additional physical therapy sessions. Said they seemed excessive given your condition. The familiar pattern emerged again, Robert's concern for my care directly proportional to its cost to him. Thank you for telling me, I said, adding this to my mental file. That evening, Robert called, his voice uncharacteristically cheerful. Great news, Mom. I spoke with Uncle Harold's lawyer today. He says they can release some funds while the estate processes. I'm thinking we could use it to finally get you set up at home with us. You spoke with Mr. Winters? I asked, alarmed that Robert had contacted my attorney directly. Well, I left a message. His assistant said he'd call back. Robert paused. Mom, these delays are getting ridiculous. It's been months. We need to be more proactive about moving things along. We, always we. Actually, Robert, I said carefully, Mr. Winters mentioned the possibility of an advance distribution. Nothing major, but perhaps enough to address some immediate concerns. His tone shifted instantly. Really? That's excellent. How much are we talking about? $50,000. A pause. That's helpful, though given the total estate value. It's a start, I replied firmly. The rest will take time, Robert. Legal processes can't be rushed. After ending the call, I updated my digital journal, then sent a secure email to Mr. Winters authorizing the advance distribution to Robert. The money would likely disappear into his financial black hole, but it would buy me precious time to secure the remaining $7,950,000. Time to ensure my remaining years would be lived on my terms, not as a convenient solution to my son's financial problems. As I prepared for bed, assisted by an evening aide, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was changed not just by the stroke that had weakened my left side, but by something in her eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before, a clarity born of difficult truths. I hardly recognized her, yet somehow I felt I was finally seeing myself clearly for the first time in years. Excellent progress, Mrs. Sullivan. Dr. Chen, my new physical therapist at Hillcrest, noted approvingly as I completed the walking exercise with only my cane for support. "You've graduated from the walker entirely?" "For short distances," I confirmed, catching my breath. 6 months since the stroke, and each victory still came wrapped in the humbling package of limitations. I still need the wheelchair for anything longer than across my apartment. Nevertheless, most patients with similar strokes don't achieve this level of recovery, especially at my age, I finished wryly. I'm beginning to think that phrase should be banned from medical vocabulary. Chen smiled. I was going to say, especially with interrupted therapy cycles. Your records show inconsistent sessions at your previous facility. Sunset had staffing issues, I said diplomatically, not mentioning that Robert had opted for the bare minimum Medicare-covered therapy.